Hey guys, it's Editing Brandy here. I just wanted to let you know that before you start this video, for whatever reason, when I was filming this video, when I was editing this video, whatever could go wrong went wrong. I had audio problems, I had video problems, I had editor problems, you name it. And I was just about to skip this whole entire week. But I tried one more time and I finally got the video out. But I just wanted to give you a little disclaimer that as this video, if the angle isn't right or the audio is a little off or my editing is a little rougher than usual, it's because this was just a bad week for videos. But anyway, try to focus on the story. Thanks, guys. Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel, True Crime and Felines. For those that are new here, my name is Brandy, and every Friday I bring you a true crime case or mystery with one or more of my fabulous felines. For my returning subscribers, welcome back, my feline friends. And a big thank you to my feline fans who are members of this channel. I really do appreciate your support. Did you eat something bad? Now, many of you probably noticed that I've been trying out the new feature called YouTube Shorts. YouTube Shorts is videos that are a minute long or less and usually have music or sound effects accompanying them. It's pretty much YouTube's answer to TikTok. So I've been having fun doing those, so I hope you've enjoyed them. I have also added a new playlist that I'll start filling up with videos. That is called just Feline Fun. And these videos are basically just my life with these fabulous felines. There is a video in there already about a catio upgrade and a catio full tour in case you are interested. Now, as always, my true crime videos will be uploaded every Friday. So if you're just here for true crime, and that's okay, just know that any video going up on a Friday is actually a true crime video and nothing else. Do you mind? So this week's case I wanted to share with you because it happened here in Iowa where I live in 1973. It's pretty well known, and I first heard about it when I was a kid, and of course the stories have grew since then, but I'm only going to bring you the facts in the case. Pretty much it's just about 5 teenagers that were in the wrong place at the wrong time. So let's get started. So the Gichi-Manitou area is a 91-acre nature preserve in northwestern Iowa in Lyon County. It's very close to South Dakota as well. The name Gichi-Manitou translates into great spirit or great force of nature. So the Gichi-Manitou is known for its Native American burial grounds and its ancient quartz that are on the grounds, which are estimated to be like 1.6 billion years old. So if you're ever in that area, I suggest that you check it out. It is very pretty up there. Unfortunately, the place is also known as a place where something sinister happened. So on November 17th, 1973, 5 teenagers from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, decided to hang out at the Gichi-Manitou just to enjoy the evening. The teenagers were Roger Essam, who was 17 years old, his girlfriend, Sandra Chesky, who was 13 years old, Stuart Bade, who was 18, Dana Bade, who was 14, and Michael Hadrith, who was 15. Now, overall, these were good kids. They had no criminal behavior, and they were just 5 friends that decided to enjoy the evening, hang out by a campfire, and sing some songs. They got to the park about 10:30 that night, built a campfire. Michael brought out his guitar, and they got to singing. And they also got to passing around some marijuana. Unbeknownst to them, they had company. And this company were 3 brothers called the Fryer brothers. There was Alan, who was 29, David, who was 24, and James, who was 21. they were also from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Now, these brothers were no strangers to crime. They had stolen vehicles, they robbed people, and, they have seen the inside of a jail cell more than once. The brothers were actually out there poaching deer, and they came up upon the campsite and heard the teenagers singing. So Alan and James told David to spy on the teenagers for a time and report back to them what he saw. So David did just that, and then he reported back to his brothers that the teenagers had marijuana. Now, the brothers decided to steal this marijuana under the guise of acting like narcotic officers. So they grabbed their guns, which were stolen, by the way, and they proceeded towards the campsite. However, instead of just coming up on the campsite and announcing they were narcotic officers and confiscating the marijuana, they actually positioned themselves up on this ridge that overlooked the campsite. Now, the teenagers that had been singing had kind of been hearing like twigs snapping and what they thought were footsteps, and it did surprise them because they thought they were out there all alone. So Roger, who was 17, had stood up and he shouted, "Who's there?" Now, nobody would answer, but unfortunately, gunshots rang out. Roger immediately fell to the ground, and so did Stuart, and they had both been shot. The rest of the teenagers scattered and took cover in the woods. So the brothers came off the ridge and then beckoned the teenagers to come out of the woods. And in order to get the teenagers to come out of the woods, they actually stated not to worry about Roger and Stuart, who were still by the campfire, because they actually just shot them with tranquilizer guns. Well, Michael and Sandra, who had been hiding together behind a tree, believed these brothers and came out from behind the tree. And Michael stated, "Who the hell do you think you are?" At that point, Alan, the oldest brother, shot Michael in the arm. And Alan immediately gathered them up and told them to get up. He then repeated that they were narcotic officers and that they needed to all come with them. So they gathered up everyone but Roger. They thought Roger was unconscious from the tranquilizer, but in reality, he was shot and he had actually died instantly. But they gathered everybody else up and they marched them to the parking lot where the brothers had their truck and the teenagers had parked their van. They told everyone that they would go back for Roger later. They ended up tying Sandra's hands behind her back. Now, remember, she thought that these were police officers, so she thought that she was going to be arrested or be sent to some juvenile detention. And then they put her in the truck. This made sense to her because she was the youngest at 13, so she really didn't think much of it. They then rounded up the remaining 4 boys and lined them up on the road. So at this point, Alan got into the truck with Sandra and started it up. Sandra had actually turned out the window and told the boys, "I guess I'll see you Monday in school." And then at that point, Alan and Sandra drove away. So Michael, Stuart, and Dana were the 3 boys left with James and David Fryer. After the truck disappeared down the road, James and David would execute them one by shooting them. So Sandra is now in the brothers' truck with her hands tied behind her back, and Alan did end up untying her. He just kind of drove around for a while talking to her and telling her that, he was the boss and that the other 2 did whatever he told them to. Eventually, Alan pulled over at the side of the road and waited, and another car pulled up on them, and it happened to be the van that Sandra assumed that the other 2 police officers and her friends were in the van as well. But James and David got out of the van and hopped in the truck, and they all drove away, leaving the van deserted on the side of the road. So they would end up driving to South Dakota, which was not that far away. And around Hartford, South Dakota, Alan would pull into an abandoned farm. Once at the farm, all the brothers got out of the truck, but then James got back in. He then demanded Sandra take off all of her clothes, and then he sexually assaulted her. After the assault, Alan was helping Sandra out of the truck, and Sandra had said, "I was a virgin, you know. I'm only 13." She stated Alan did not believe her at first, but as the night wore on, he was shocked to learn that she wasn't lying. She had actually just turned 13 a couple months before. The next morning, Alan grabbed Sandra and forced her back into the truck without the other brothers. Sandra stated she remembered Alan filling up the truck with this big red gas can that he got in front of the garage. Alan was still putting on that he was a police officer, and he ended up telling Sandra that since she was only 13, that she was too young to be busted, and he just drove her home. So once Sandra was dropped off at home, it wouldn't be until later that day that she had reported what had happened to her. You see, in her mind, she thought these guys were police. I mean, corrupt police at this point, right? But they were still police, and that her friends were fine. She had no idea what actually happened to her friends. It wasn't until she tried calling her boyfriend Roger, and Roger's family stated that they couldn't find him. They didn't know where he was at, and that they were glad to hear from her because all of her friends were missing. Well, shortly after that, the bodies of the teenagers were found by a couple that were just out driving their new car around. They found the 3 boys by the road, and then Roger was found by the campsite shortly thereafter. Sandra received the news that all of her friends were gone. Now, the police started their investigation, and they knew that 3 guns were used in the killings of these teenage boys. That there was a 12 gauge, a 16 gauge, and a 20 gauge shotgun. So they figured they were looking for at least 3 different killers. Now, Sandra would tell the police everything that happened that night, including her assault and where she and that she was taken to an abandoned farm, but she wasn't sure where it was at because it was dark. But she was really good at remembering a lot of the details, especially what the Fryer brothers looked like, and a sketch artist was brought in to work up a composite. So the next part of this investigation was they were trying to find out where this farm was that she was taken to, and for the next several weeks, Sandra would get in the car with 2 detectives, and they would literally drive her around the countryside. Now, it wasn't until November 29th when they were again driving around the countryside for the umpteenth time, and they just happened to turn down a road, and Sandra noticed a big red gas can in front of a garage and told the investigators to stop. And then as she looked around, she realized this was the exact farm that she was brought to. So the investigators pulled into the abandoned farm in order to try to figure out who actually owned the place. Now, the farm would end up being owned by a local farmer, but that local farmer happened to employ Alan Fryer as a farmhand. And by chance, while the investigators were at this farm, guess who drives by in a pickup truck? That's right, Alan. Just by chance, he drives by, and Sandra screamed, "That's him! That's the boss." The investigators quickly got into their car, followed the truck, pulled him over, and put Alan in handcuffs and arrested him on the spot. David and James Fryer were quickly implicated in this manner, tracked down and arrested shortly as well. So when Alan was interviewed for the first or second time, he actually would try to tell the investigators that actually the teenagers were the ones shooting at them, and that when they shot back just to, give a warning shot, they accidentally hit someone who happened to be Roger. But by the time Alan was interviewed for a third time and shown physical evidence, Alan did tell the truth on what really happened that night. But he still tried to justify his actions by saying that, the kids were drinking and smoking marijuana. And the brothers just wanted to steal it. Oh, okay, Alan. I guess that justifies everything. James and David Fryer at first were put in a lineup, and Sandra did pick them out immediately. And they compared the composite sketches to the brothers, who were pretty good, spot on. Now, when they interviewed David, who was the middle brother, David started telling a story similar to Alan, that the teenagers were shooting at them, but he quickly then changed the story and told the truth as well. James, however, the youngest brother, straight away blamed everything on his two brothers. James was actually already serving time in jail when this happened, and he actually was on a work release program, so when he had to work a shift, they let him out of jail. Well, what had happened that day and night, apparently, is that David Fryer had called the jail impersonating James's employer and stated that James needed to work an extra shift late into the night, so the jail let him out. And instead of course, working, James spent the night hanging with his brothers and murdering teenagers. So the story James told was that the teenagers were smoking marijuana, and Alan wanted to steal it from him, and he wanted to steal it from him by playing a game and acting like he was a narcotics officer. James would then blame Alan and said that Alan just opened fire and ended up killing Roger, then blamed David for killing the remaining of the boys. He also was adamant that when it came to Sandra, that she was just having a good time throughout this whole ordeal. You know, through her friends being murdered, she was having a good time. And that she had expressed interest in actually being with both David and James, and he did not force himself on her. It was completely consensual. Yeah, I'm sure that's what happened. Regardless, all three Fryer brothers were put into the Sioux Falls, South Dakota jail and charged with 4 counts of murder. The bond was set at $400,000 for each brother, which was accounted by $100,000 per murder. So the courts decided to try the brothers all separately through a span of 18 months. The brothers' main defense was that they were acting like narcotic agents, and they thought that narcotic agents had free reign to kill anyone using drugs for no reason. Which makes me laugh, because it's like, even if that was true, you're not narcotic agents. You were acting like them. Now, during the trials, there were some issues around Sandra, because they stated that some of her story kind of changed here and there. But when they really checked into it, it was very minor things that have changed. And they chalked that up to, 1, she was 13, and 2, she had just gone through some major trauma after being assaulted. So yeah, some of those minor details were going to probably change, but the major details and the story as a whole never changed. She never changed her story. She even was given a polygraph test, and she passed. So in February 1974, David Fryer ended up just pleading guilty to 3 charges of murder and 1 charge of manslaughter. He did admit that he did outright shoot Stuart Bade. Now, David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. David did not like this, and David stated to the judge, "If all my appeals fail, I will actually write the governor and ask for the death penalty. I won't live out my life in jail. Keeping me locked up for life can't turn around what happened, and it can't bring those people back." Alan Fryer actually ended up going through psychiatric testing. He tried to claim insanity, but he was actually found fit to stand trial. So he was found guilty of 4 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to 4 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. Not that that matters at that point. As for James Fryer, the youngest one, he at first fought extradition from South Dakota back to Iowa because he thought if he, would fight the extradition and they wouldn't extradite him back to Iowa, that this whole thing will just go away. Well, he was wrong, and he got desperate. So in June of 1974, Alan and James actually escaped from the Sioux Falls jail. They stole a vehicle and they fled the state. A couple months later, they were found in Wyoming and they were brought back to face federal charges. So in December of 1974, a state psychiatrist determined that James actually had an IQ of 85, which would result in him not being able to control his behavior or poorly control his behavior. Basically, he was saying that he was easily manipulated by his brothers. It didn't really matter, though, because James was found guilty of 3 charges of first-degree murder and 1 charge of manslaughter, and he also was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As for the sexual assault charge, the judge felt that since James was already going to be in jail for the rest of his life, that he did not want to subject Sandra to yet another trial and a assault trial. So they just called it good. Alan is currently serving his sentence out in Anamosa, Iowa, and James and David are serving their sentence out in Fort Dodge, Iowa. All the appeals the brothers have filed since the 70s have been denied, and they are out. They're done. In 2016, however, David, he was the one who stated that he was going to ask for the death penalty if his appeals failed. He wrote and asked the parole board to turn over the without the possibility of parole part of his sentence. It was denied, and I couldn't find anywhere where he actually asked the governor for the death penalty, so I guess he will live out his life in prison. So the big question in all of this, though, was why did they let Sandra go and leave a witness to this whole incident? Well, authorities found out years later when they talked to Alan that Alan was supposed to take Sandra that morning and get rid of her. Alan would tell the authorities that when he found out she was only 13, it shook him because she looked a lot older and he didn't believe her at first. But apparently, Alan had a stepdaughter that was 13 years old, and that's what made him decide not to go through with what he was supposed to do. See, Alan had spent about 3 to 4 hours with Sandra during that time, and he actually got to know her as a person and no longer looked at her as an object, that she was a child, and that he actually promised her after the assault, but during the night sometime, that he would do whatever he could to get her out of there. So, the next morning when his brothers are like, okay, time to get rid of Sandra, Alan volunteered to be the one to do it, fully knowing that he wasn't going to, and he was actually going to let her go. And he drove her all the way home to her house. Now, Alan's brothers, they had zero clue that Sandra survived until it came out in the papers about the murders and that there was one witness that survived. So obviously this caused a bit of tension between the brothers. And supposedly that's why they're now at different jails, that Alan is by himself and the 2 other brothers are in Fort Dodge. Now, there is a bit of history on the Fryer brothers in a book written by Phil and Sandy Hammond. If you want to check that out, it's called Gitchie Girl. Now, the Fryer family was full of violence. They actually had a father that the only reason he had children was to put them to work for him, and that he referred to them as his chore boys. Now, Phil, the author, had stated the following about the Fryer brothers. They were criminals when they were in each other's presence. For the Fryer brothers, life was all about what was going to be the next crime, what could they steal next, or what they could go out and shoot next. Now, the brothers kept saying that, the marijuana was the whole motive for the murders, right? But it didn't really make much sense, because if all you wanted was the marijuana, you could easily come up, act like narcotic officers, take the marijuana, and leave. So why did the teenagers get killed? Well, there's one former detective who had studied the case and studied the brothers extensively, and he offers a bit more sinister motive. He stated that these guys went hunting that day. That to start with, they started hunting pheasants. Well, they couldn't find any pheasants. So they started hunting deer, and they couldn't find any deer. And that's when they decided to hunt the one thing that they could find and stumbled upon. These poor teenagers. So was this whole thing just a big thrill to shoot something? How messed up is that? As for Sandra, she had nightmares for years after all of this, for obvious reasons. And she ended up dropping out of school due to criticism from her classmates and kind of being shunned from the community a bit. Now, she would walk with her head down through most of her 20s because she was made to feel ashamed about what happened that night. Now, at age 26, she did get married. She is now a mother and a grandmother. And in 2013, she visited the Gichi-Manitou for the first time after that night to let go of some demons. Now, she no longer walks with her head down, and she wants her children and her grandchildren to know that she wasn't doing anything that wrong that night, and she was a victim, and no one deserves what happened to them. So what are your thoughts on this case? Do you think this crime was committed over stealing marijuana from some teenagers, or were the brothers really just looking for something to shoot? I'd love to hear what you think in the comments down below. If you'd like to become a feline friend, just hit that subscribe button. If you would like to become a feline fan, hit that join button and become a channel member. And we will be back next Friday with a true crime case or mystery. Thanks, guys. Bye.